Welcome to the Plane Hoppers Guild.
Greetings, adventurers, explorers, treasure seekers, and sellswords. Welcome to the Plane Hoppers Guild. I'm Journeyman Eric.
And I'm Dungeon Lord Jay.
And we're here to talk about D&D.
Yes.
And my goodness, we have a good one today.
I'm very excited.
So what are we excited about, Jay?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and just get right into it? We do have a lot to talk about.
We have an awesome first topic, Fiends 101.
That's right. I have decided that I'm going to give us the rundown on Fiends. So, in order to do that, I have to start off with, in Fiend 101, you have to talk about a couple of aspects before we can sort of dive into what is a fiend. So many creatures from the outer planes embody an alignment on the alignment chart. And alignment is a whole other topic for a different day. We could dedicate a whole episode just to alignment. But I'm here to talk about fiends today. And fiends are of the lower planes, and they represent the evil alignment. So lawful evil, neutral evil, and chaotic evil. There are three kinds of fiends, those representing each of the three. Lawful evil is devils, chaotic evil is demons, and neutral evil is Yugoloths. There are others that don't fit devils, demons, and Yugoloths, like night hags and hellhounds and rakshasas. But generally, if it's lawful evil, it's a devil. If it's neutral evil, it's a Yugoloth. If it's chaotic evil, it's a demon. Am I making sense so far, Eric?
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay, well, the first group that I wanted to talk about was devils, or they are also called Batezu. Baatezu. Batezu. So what do you know about devils, Eric?
Besides what I've seen from Baldur's Gate 3, I know that devils and demons really don't get along that well.
They don't. That is true. That is true. And we're going to talk about that. You have to talk about the Blood War when you talk about devils and demons. Is there anything else you know about devils specifically?
Trying to think, searching the mind palace of information. I mean, I know that devils are very typically the deal makers and
Yes, you are correct.
The ones who may grant power to mortals.
You are correct. So, devils, they embody lawful evil. They live in Bator, or the Nine Hells. And their traits, generally speaking, all devils sort of embody these traits, which is tyranny, conquest, enslavement, oppression, torture. They are the ones that, like you said before, make the contracts and strike bargains for mortals' souls. Devils have a very, very strict hierarchy. And they are made, and devils are created, sort of birthed into the universe, from corrupted mortal souls. Mm-hmm. So technically speaking, devils have souls. They come from the souls that travel down the river Styx, which we'll talk about in a second, from the mortal plane, sort of come out of the river Styx as the weakest form of devil, called a lemure. So when a mortal soul is like corrupted or whatever, and or even if you're just an evil person and you go to hell, you start off as a soul in the river Styx for 1,000 years or something, until eventually you get enough strength to pull yourself out of the river, and you come out as a lemure, which is like just a pile of disgusting flesh. And the hierarchy of devils is as such. Lemures are the bottom. And then there is a category of devils called lesser devils, a category of devils called greater devils, and then at the very, very top is an archdevil. So the way that devils work is that every devil has a master, a superior,
Mhm.
because of this strict sort of hierarchy. So Lemures have everyone to look up to, and then lesser devils just have the greater devils and the archdevils, and then the greater devils just have the archdevils, and the archdevils each have rule over their own plane, but they all answer to the archduke of the nine hells, whose name is Asmodeus, and he's the ruler of the ninth layer of hell, known as Nessus.
Okay, I've heard of Asmodeus for sure.
Yeah, I think there's another archdevil that you may have heard of. Her name is Zariel.
Yes, definitely.
She is the leader, the ruler of the first layer of hell, called Avernus. So that's basically devils. You know, a Lemure, if he gets enough, if he does enough for his master, for his superior, he could turn into an imp. And then that imp, if he does enough work, he can turn into a spine devil. And if that imp does enough work, he could turn into a barb devil. And they just sort of go up the ranks. The highest that you can be without being an archduke is a greater devil called a pit fiend, which are like CR fucking 20 something devils. And they're like what you think of when you think of like big monster devil.
Okay. Not to get too off topic, but if I remember right, so most devils come from the River Styx, but isn't Zariel a fallen angel?
She is, and that's a whole thing. But she was an angel that was really pissed off that well, we got to talk about the Blood War, because the Blood War is like a linchpin to this whole thing. But she was upset that the angels weren't more involved in the Blood War. So she like went rogue and went to, fight in the Blood War. And then she got all fucked up and she was like near death. And Asmodeus came to her and said, "Hey, you're a badass fighter. Why don't you stay here in Avernus and I'll let you rule here?" And we all know she took the deal.
Yeah.
So that's basically devils. They're my favorite of the fiends. They're really easy to use in just dealing devils, and they have a lot of what's it called, like red tape. It's like
Bureaucracy.
Yes, the whole thing with devils is a huge bureaucracy.
I know. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna move on. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I know that pacts are very important. Like they are the rules lawyers of the
of course universe. And they adhere to it too. That's something that's interesting, is even though they're evil, they're lawful. They will follow the rules. They will manipulate the rules and find loopholes and stuff like that, but they will work within a set of guidelines.
Right.
Which is the complete opposite of our next group, which are the demons. Or they're also called Tenari. And just because this is a fun fact that I bet you didn't know. So the reason that devils are called Batazu and demons are called Tenari was back in 2nd edition, was like the height of the Satanic Panic. And when they came out with the monster manual, they didn't want to have demons in big bold letter and devils in big bold letters, where they described a bunch of demons and devils, because people already were freaking out about the devil. So they renamed them to Batezu and Tenari.
You would think a game about like slaughtering demons and devils would be popular, but
but anyways, the demons are the Tenari, and they embody chaotic evil. So what do you know anything about demons? Anything at all?
Much less about demons. Aren't quasits demons? Like
they are. Yes, they are. Yes, they are very, very small. They're a group of lesser demons, but yes.
Well, that's about my knowledge.
So demons live in what's called the infinite abyss, or just the abyss. So there's 9 layers in hell, But in the Abyss, it is infinite layers. There is unknown levels of depth to the Abyss. It's called the Abyss. And that's where demons are born. So demons' traits are savagery, destruction, ruthlessness. They basically only exist to spread chaos and evil. Demons' first and only desire is to corrupt or destroy everything in the universe. And another trait it's not as common in this edition of D&D, but it's well known that demons can possess mortals. I mean, sometimes, occasionally. Powerful demons can possess a mortal and make them do evil stuff. But demons are born in the Abyss from this substance called ichor or ichor. It's this sort of black sludge. And this sort of black sludge is pervasive in the Abyss. It just exists there. It's basically what the Abyss is made from. And they don't have souls because they are just pop out of the ground. And there's an infinite number of them. So like we were discussing devils before, they have to be a corrupted soul that goes through a strict sort of regiment to become some certain type of devil, right? Over the course of thousands of years. Demons just pop out of the ground being super powerful or super weak, just depending. And there's trillions of them. There's an infinite number of demons.
Ooh, sounds like they destroy the universe if left unchecked.
Yeah. So demons can be categorized as similarly as devils in lesser, greater, and demon princes, but they themselves don't adhere to categories. They don't care about who's more powerful than the other. All they care about is brute strength. Can I kill this other devil that's next to, or this other demon that's next to me? Okay, then I'm more powerful than him. I'm his boss, Right. Strength and power is the only things that sort of keep them in any sort of, structure. But demon princes are the most powerful kind of demon. Do you know any demon princes?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, so there's two that I'm going to just talk about briefly. And the first one I'm going to talk about, his name is Demogorgon.
Ooh, so I've heard of him.
Yes, so Demogorgon is the self-proclaimed prince of all demons. So like Asmodeus is the king of hell, it is claimed that Demogorgon is the prince of all demons. The only reason that is true is because demon princes are constantly fighting against each other to claim more layers of the Abyss. Because when you claim a new layer of the Abyss, you get more power. Mm-hmm. So these demon princes are constantly fighting against each other, taking over each other's layers and stuff like that to gain in power. And no one has ever stepped to Demogorgon. And if they have, they didn't do very well. One of the demon princes that tries to step to Demogorgon but fails constantly is Orcus. I think you and me talked about him recently. He's the demon prince of undeath. So he has lots of like undead and demons. So
okay. Oh yeah, there was the cult of Orcus. I remember.
Yes, because Orcus is like a demon god, sort of, and he embodies undeath. So it's like a perfect for like a cult or something.
Mm-hmm.
But that's demons and devils. Do we have any questions on demons and devils so far?
Let's see. So you had mentioned that sort of black Icarus stuff they're made out of. The demons. Does that have like, if there are a bunch of demons on the mortal plane, like they came through a hellgate or whatever and they all died, would that like corrupt the land or something, or could more demons spawn from that black ichor or something like that?
So that's a very good question. So when devils die on the mortal plane, they erupt into fire and return to hell. Right? They don't, and when a devil, like let's say an imp, right? He just worked his way from becoming for 1,000 years, was a lemure, and then finally became an imp. He got sent to the mortal plane, and he gets killed by an adventurer. He gets sent back to the River Styx as a soul and has to come back out as a lemure again.
Oof.
Okay, so they have to start the process all over again. Yeah, so if you take a pit fiend, one of the more higher powered devils, and you kill him on the mortal plane, he goes back as a lemure too. So that really pisses him off. But the thing about demons is that the Ichor, when they are killed on the mortal plane, they leave behind the Ichor, right? They just melt into a pile of Ichor. They don't go back home. They just melt into a pile of Ichor. And Ichor is so unstable and chaotic. I mean, it is, embodies the chaotic evil that it could do both of those things that you just said. It could spawn more demons. It could corrupt the land, or it could, if a mortal touches it, corrupt a mortal, and they'll grow extra appendages or weird bat wings or something. Like it could spread a demonic sort of evil onto a human as well.
Ooh, damn.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, Ichor is basically demons and the abyss. It's basically the abyss, right? The abyss is made from Ichor, so demons being made from it makes sense.
Yeah, I have to imagine a human touching the abyss probably doesn't usually go very well.
No, I can't imagine. But that brings us to something that I have to discuss if we're going to talk about demons and devils, and that is the Blood War, right? So the Blood War is this ancient conflict that rages between fiends of the lower planes, all three types. And it has been going on since the dawn of time. It's essentially a war between law and chaos. And and I did some further research, Eric, and I learned a couple things about the Blood War that I didn't know before. But because I thought it was part of the Pact Primeval that Asmodeus made with the gods, but I was wrong. Apparently nobody really knows why the Blood War started, but it's thought that because demons want nothing more than to completely destroy all planes of existence, that's just what they want. And because of the ironic cosmological placement of the abyss, in order for any one demon to make it to, let's say, the material plane, without a portal or being summoned, right? They must travel up the River Styx, which flows basically from Avernus all the way down into every layer of the abyss, right? So it goes through hell and then into the abyss. So if you were a demon trying to get to the mortal plane, you would have to travel through all 9 layers of the hell and all of the abyss in order to get to the material plane. Demons got to travel through the 9 hells to make it to the material plane, and the devils of the 9 hells sort of serve as a first bulwark against the sort of ceaseless destruction that demons spread. Because without a material plane, there are no souls. And without any souls, there's no more devils.
Right, they have their ulterior motives, or primary motives, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's feeds right into what they want. So the sort of front lines of the Blood War takes place in the first layer of the 9 hells called Avernus. Like we were just discussing with Zariel and all that stuff. That's why Avernus itself is just a fucking hellscape of war and destruction, like a post-apocalyptic sort of world, because there's just constantly demons flooding in and devils fighting back against them. The interesting thing that I find about the Blood War is the difference between the demons and the devils. Demons are countless. They swarm, right? So when they fight with savagery and just toss themselves at the problem, right? But devils, they must come from souls, and they've been around a lot longer. So they are much more highly trained in combat. So devils fight with tactics. Demons fight with swarms. And that's the difference between law and chaos, right?
Okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting that like just demons just swarm through, but there's like one legion of highly trained devils that can combat all of them. You know, it's pretty cool. I think the Blood War is absolutely fascinating. It's one of my favorite things in D&D. That's why I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't have any experience with, like, running the Blood Wars or anything myself. It sounds fucking awesome.
It's so cool. And there's all kinds of shit. Like they have war machines that are powered by like devils use these things called war machines, which are like giant tanks and cars and stuff that like with lawnmower blades on them that just drive over swarms of demons and stuff. And they're run by they destroy and burn up souls that are trapped in soul coins. So you like take a soul and insert it into the machine of this hellfire engine, and it'll just destroy the soul, but it gives it the machine power to drive over. It's so metal.
That is fucking awesome.
Yes, it is. So that leaves the last of the three groups, and I had to talk about the Blood War first because the third group, I'm sure you know nothing about Yugoloths, right?
Basically nothing.
Okay. So the thing that I had to bring the Blood War up first because Yugoloths are integral to the Blood War. So Yugoloths are also called daemons, daemons. They are neutral evil. And they don't really have a home plane necessarily. They inhabit all the lower planes, but are natives mostly to the bleak eternity of Gehenna and the gray wastes of Hades. These aren't necessarily that's their home, but who really knows where they came from? They're not like demons and devils where it's very clear where they come from. So the traits of a Yugoloth are as such. They are manipulative, they are secretive, they are selfish, and they are scheming. And they are also all basically mercenaries by nature. So they are neutral evil. So if you imagine the Blood War as law on one side, chaos on the other, they are neutral in this conflict. But that doesn't mean they don't fight in the war. In fact, they are used to like a lot in the Blood War. The reason being, well, let me describe Yugoloths first. So each type of Yugoloth has absolutely no similarities in form as the next. Right? So demons are all made of ichor and, they're gross and slimy and just demons, right? And devils all have horns and fire and stuff like that, right? Yugoloths are all vastly different from each other. There are different kinds of different categories or subtypes of Yugoloths. A couple of them include Arcanoloths, Mesoloths, Nicoloths. All Yugoloth subtypes end in loth. So it can be a blah, blah, blah loth, and that's a type of Yugoloth. You know what I mean?
Okay. Are there any noticeable Yugoloths? Or, like, notable, I should say?
So they do have like leaders and stuff. I didn't put that in my notes, but that's not important to them because they're all selfish. Right. So they don't usually look up to any sort of leader. There is an important thing about the Book of Keeping that's important to Yugoloths. So I'll mention that in a little bit, but not really. There's no like demon lord of Yugoloths. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Because they're all so selfish that they can't ever end up looking up to one being. Right. So Yugoloths are like the perfect fuel to the fire of the Blood War. Because Yugoloths work for themselves. That means they work for both sides of the war.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not uncommon that a Yugoloth will come into battle, an army of Yugoloths will come into battle with a group of demons. And in the middle of combat, a powerful devil approaches one of the Yugoloths and says, hey, man, we're going to offer you way more gold than that team is offering you. They will just turn around and switch sides in the middle of combat and start fighting against the demons.
Seems like a Actually, could be a useful trait if you have something to offer.
Exactly. In my opinion, Yugoloths are the most evil kind of fiend. Because they are unpredictable.
Exactly. I was just thinking, like, with devils, you know where you sit. With demons, they're, you can never trust them, of course. But they're Yugoloths sound kind of insidious almost.
Yeah, like you could trust them, but not very, very much.
Yeah.
I think they're very fascinating. I've never got to use them to a great extent in any campaign, but I know enough about them for them to be very interesting. But one more important thing to Yugoloths, this, how devils have deals, demons come from Ichor, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So Yugoloths, their like key aspect, right, is this thing called the Book of Keeping. So there was a book penned by an unknown author, and within the book has somehow miraculously has the true name of every Yugoloth in existence. True names sort of work like they give you power, like they give one being power over the creature if you know what their true name is. Mm-hmm. So Yugoloths might go by, whatever, Marty, but like his true name is Enponkololoth or whatever, right? And if you know that name, the way that Yugoloths work is you will have power over that Yugoloth. So they can't turn on you. Oh yes, exactly what you're thinking. Any amount of power. They're your slave. Yeah, it's like like when how you could summon a demon or whatever, and then they have to work for you. Mm-hmm. Like a summon fiend or whatever spell in D&D. It's sort of like that, where you just have full control over this Yugoloth. And this book, called the Book of Keeping, has every Yugoloth's name in it ever to exist, right? And there's multiple copies of the book, so the legends say, right? So there's more than one version of this Book of Keeping. But the thing about it is, it's been lost to time. And all Yugoloths both fear and treasure this book, right? Because if you're the Yugoloth, because all of them are selfish, if you're a Yugoloth and you get a hold of this book, now you're the king of Yugoloths. Right. And you also fear it because if somebody else gets it, now you're nobody, So basically all Yugoloths make it their sort of mission to locate this book.
Huh. I wonder, like, is it actually lost for time? Or, of course it's probably sitting in some god's
library.
Vault or something.
Sure. But that's up. I love mysteries like this in the lore in D&D because that leaves it up to the DM to answer that question.
Right. Kind of a little guiding point for a storyline.
Yeah, like this could be a whole campaign where it's like one of the player characters finds a Book of Keeping, and now every Yugoloth in existence is after them.
Oh shit. So knowing a Yugoloth's name has power over them. Can that power ever be broken? Because I'm thinking you would then have a very mad Yugoloth to deal with.
Right. I think it's like if you word the name into a spell or something like that, then you can, the spell automatically takes effect and stuff like that, and you can summon that Yugoloth at any time. I'm not sure, honestly, Eric. I'm not sure if that can be broken or not.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I think it leaves room. I think that's a good point for a DM to sort of step in and say, okay, this is how I'm going to tell this story,
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's demons, devils, and Yugoloths. Fiend 101.
Are we going to be quizzed after this? No.
Yeah.
I know, like, this is super surface level. It's still really fucking cool. Because, I mean, you don't really, on an average, like what most people might consider an average D&D campaign where you're traveling through the woods poking goblins, you really don't get into any of this nitty-gritty detail. So it's really cool to see, like, the in-depth stuff working behind the scenes and all of this stuff. I just really like it. I love lore.
I've seen Yugoloths be sort of inserted in to like a dungeon in a written module or something, and usually they'll, it's a role play encounter or it's just a combat encounter, right? But I think knowing the lore sort of gives that small moment, even if it's just a combat encounter, it gives that small moment. You can sort of add in these little bit of details that makes your world feel real.
Yeah, and it's something special. It's not just a toothy monster. There is something working behind the scenes in this creature for the way that it acts.
Right, and it can give your encounters more depth, in my opinion.
No,
but all right,
I love it.
We did it. Fiend 101. Did you learn something?
I learned a lot.
Good.
Pretty much everything about Yugoloths.
Yeah, I know. I was really excited to do it because I thought you would find it interesting. But okay. Do you want to move on to sage advice?
Absolutely, because this is another big topic, not just for me, but a lot of new DMs, is scene descriptions, sort of tips, tricks, and what's the best, subjectively, the best way to do it.
So when you came to me with this sage advice topic, I thought about how I'm going to approach answering your questions, but I think I want to start by asking you, what is your approach to describing a scene?
Ooh, this is a tricky question. Since I don't have much experience running stuff myself, really, I'm kind of adapting what I see in real play campaigns and stuff I read online or watch online. I approach this as it's a dungeon master's job to try and work with a theater of the mind, to give players more than just you walk into a room and there's a skeleton. There should be something they can kind of envision in the world.
To what level of detail do you usually, goes to?
It probably swings between not enough and too much. I try and keep it to where I will list out unique details of the room. Like, you shouldn't be describing the color of the floor unless it has a meaning.
Right. I think I can agree with that. In my opinion, there is no right approach to describing a scene. In my opinion, it's a spectrum. And there are two ends of this spectrum. And in order to sort of clearly define it, I'm going to use dungeon masters that I am familiar with as sort of touchstones. So at one end of the spectrum is the Matt Mercer approach, Matthew Mercer from Critical Role.
Right.
His approach to describing a scene is what I call the storybook approach. So Matt Mercer himself is very well read, very learned, and he has a very wide vocabulary. So when he describes a scene, he goes into this eloquent sort of level of detail, and he describes it in a way that feels like you're reading a book, but a very, very descriptive book. He describes things down to, like you said, the color of the floor, to the length of the beard of the wizard, and what color his clothes are, and what level of dirty they are. And I mean, this dude goes into insane amount of detail. Every single time he describes something. And on the other end of the spectrum, on the complete opposite side from Matt Mercer, is my DM hero, Chris Perkins, who is the lead creative designer of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So Chris Perkins' approach is very limited description. Like you said before, when you say, you walk into a room and on the floor is a skeleton, right?
Right.
That is the level of detail Chris Perkins will give you. But he expects that the player characters or the players will ask questions. So to give you a good Chris Perkins example, which I love Chris Perkins. He's my favorite dungeon master of all time. Don't love his approach to describing a scene. For example, recently I watched this video where he described a cave that they walked into with a big like mountain in the middle of it, and there was a gem at the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
The players, it was a goofy Acquisitions Incorporated game, so they started like goofing off and making jokes, and they were like, "Oh, crystal, blah blah blah." What he didn't, when one of the characters like, "Okay, we'll climb to the top of the mountain and we'll check out this crystal." When they got to the top of the mountain, he then described that they could see on the opposite side of the, or no, he said, no, the player says, "Okay, is there anything else in this room?" And he was like, "Yeah, on the other side of the mountain is a sleeping giant." And he just completely avoided describing that until they asked him.
That seems a little bit relevant.
That
seems a little relevant.
I know, but I think it's so funny that like he gives very little detail, and then whenever they ask questions, he will confirm or deny whatever they ask. So like, is there a chandelier in this room? I hadn't thought of one yet. Yes, there is. Right? If you don't go into too much detail, it leaves you room to improvise.
Right. And I don't think I've watched too much of Chris Perkins yet. I really need to. I will say just from a gut feeling, I like that direction because it lets the players ask about what's important to them.
Right.
Like maybe they won't care about the tapestries on the wall, but they want to know what furniture is in the room or something like that.
Sure. And you've noticed when I play with you, sometimes you'll describe a character, and maybe you'll say like they have sagely robes on or something like that. And I'll ask, "Oh, is there any paraphernalia on this character that seems of some religious importance? Like, can I tell what god this person worships and stuff like that?"
Yeah. And that gives you the flexibility. However, and I don't mean to be rambling. I'm kind of working through this in my head.
Yeah.
I personally like it when you can give players details that they can't get themselves, like sights and smells and sounds and tastes, because they're not actually there. But if you say they walk into a room and there's this putrid, rotting smell that anyone would notice immediately, okay, that gives them a clue of maybe something's going on here.
Yes. So, engaging all five senses is a very important tip for immersion. Right? See, hear, smell, taste, and touch, which could be like temperature or something. You know what I mean? All of if you can just glance over those real fast, and give it a quick description of all of those things, that is a pretty well described scene. Now I am immersed. I can see all of it in my mind's eye. I can experience the place myself.
Absolutely.
But back to my spectrum, right? On both, that's Matt Mercer's on one side and Chris Perkins is on the other. And in the middle is conversational. Or I feel, this is sort of a Brendan Lee Mulligan approach. So I think Brendan Lee Mulligan thrives in describing things because sometimes he'll just talk. He'll just say, "Oh, there's a field over here and, some farms and, there's, he talks like he's just chatting and describing something." And in other times, in times of importance, or when he's really trying to set the scene for the beginning of the session or beginning of a campaign, he'll sort of go into this very elegant Matt Mercer approach, right? Where it's very beautifully, worded and stuff like that. And he sort of pulls from both ends of the spectrum when he feels it necessary. So sometimes, generally, me as a dungeon master, I take the conversational approach where I'm just I'll describe something just like a normal dude. A lot of the times when I'm describing a scene, I'll use pop culture as touchstones, because I describe things in a very cinematic way, right? So, for example, if somebody grabs onto a magical cursed item, I'll say, that scene where Gollum holds the ring or Frodo holds the ring and it goes, right? And I'll describe that scene in Lord of the Rings, but then paint it so that it's one of my characters holding this cursed item, and it sort of sets a tone in their head, like, oh, this thing isn't good, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, you are talking to the players, and if you're able to touch on what the players know best, which is movies,
Yeah,
that helps immensely. Because like, oh, I know what this is. I can picture
right.
that in my head.
I've seen this movie.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like conversational is sort of the middle of the two ends, and it's a spectrum. You can use any way that you think the scene sort of it fits for the scene to keep the tone. Then it's the right approach. For example, like if the tone of your voice and the speed in which you say the things help build atmosphere. So, for example, if you're describing a chase scene, you know, where they're running after some bad guy through the city streets, you try to describe it as fast as you can, right? You know, you toss this guy and then he runs past this guy. You know, try to describe it as fast as you can to give that atmosphere of speed. But when they're
energy.
Yes, but when they're just taking a long stroll through a beautiful forest, take your time. Describe what you see. That's a good time to sort of paint a beautiful picture in their mind of what they're seeing.
You know what? I think I learned something. I honestly hadn't even considered that, but it makes total sense that you can really you can convey things with how you describe things.
I got a couple of tips just for you specifically, Eric, because I know that this is something that you actually wanted to ask me about, and I wanted to give you some real good advice. One of the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is describe the room first, and then describe the monster that's in it. So if there's a monster, there's a combat encounter coming up, describe the room first, then describe the monster. Because in my experience, and this is Matt Mercer does this too a lot, but in my experience, the players will hear monster and immediately stop listening to what you're saying. They're going to be like, all right, how do I fight this thing? What's the next thing I could do? Roll for initiative. You know, like they start thinking about how they're going to fight this monster rather than hearing your description of the room.
Right. No, that makes total sense. I'm trying to think back if on the games that I run, if I do this or not. I feel like I kind of switch back and forth between doing the rooms or the monsters first.
Like as a general rule, Eric, I put every single monster, even NPC and everything, on the GM layer, so that it gives me room for them to walk into the room on the map, see the map, and then I describe the creature, and then I put the token on. I always do that. Just because if they're walking through and they see a token, their mind is going to flip to, we're not playing, we're not like role playing anymore or exploring, we're fighting.
Right.
So every monster on the whole map, I put on the GM layer. And then when they encounter it, I will put it on the token layer.
Yeah. That is an excellent tip. We're talking about Roll20, by the way. That is an excellent tip. Just for a quick little side tangent, I wish there was a way to pause player tokens so they can't move. Because I'm not going to name names, but absolutely, there have been times where a player has started, zooming around a corner. I'm like, wait, I have to describe something.
You're not naming names because it's me.
It is more
me. I'm the problem.
Yeah.
And then the only other tip that I have for you, Eric, is something that I do regularly, and it might slow down the game a little bit, but I think it's important. And now that we've talked about conversational descriptions, it'll make more sense. So usually what I do is in a module, if there's a canned description, quote unquote, that's what I call it. If there's a description that's like written in the module, I will read that to the players. And for some reason, when I read things out, it just sounds so rigid. So I will read out the canned description, and then immediately after I read the canned description, I describe it conversationally.
Oh yeah. And this is one thing I was also gonna, I don't know if there's any actual new DMs listening yet. One tip that I would have as someone who's learning this for the first time is, actually, I think you told me to do this, is to go through like the entire dungeon or whatever you're going and make your own descriptions for rooms. Real quick, short bites.
Mm.
So that way you can have that canned description, or you can, and also you have, maybe your own notes, like you want to highlight this or you want to say that.
Yeah, I do the same. That's my approach to it too. I mean, when I'm running a dungeon, I take the dungeon on one of my computer screens, and I take a blank freaking notes thing on the other screen, and I will just translate whatever the long passages of text that they have for the descriptions or whatever of the room, and I translate it to bullet points or something short and sweet on my description, so that if I need more details, I can pull up the adventure. But I can usually run the whole thing just off of my notes.
Yeah. And for me, that's really been helpful because there have been, you have this big long paragraph describing a room, but maybe there's a pool of water in the corner. You think, oh, that would be cool to do something with, or describe it this way because it fits in somewhere else.
Right.
So that is a very good tip is, write your own descriptions. Just go through and make your own notes for you.
Last tip. It's not as good as all the other ones, but and I don't know if you struggle with this at all, Eric, but I learned this through trial and error. I always, when a creature or monster shows up, I always describe the creature, and this is Roll20 specific, or if you have handouts to show the players, I always describe the creature before I show a handout, because my description will always be more evocative than the art itself.
Right, and if you show art, they're going to be looking at that for a few. They're going to be distracted.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, did that help?
Absolutely. Fantastic.
Cool. I'm glad. I'm very glad.
And before we move on, I will say one more little thing, then we can move on.
Sure.
For any new DMs out there who are listening to this, I really struggled, especially in the beginning, with trying to think I had to make this interesting. I had to be the Matt Mercer and describe this beautiful scene and use all these words. Your players are going to have fun no matter what happens. Being a good DM isn't trying to tell them a fantastic story with all these details so they can perfectly envision it. They can envision the stuff 95% of the way themselves. You have to be there to give the key details.
Right. Absolutely.
So don't stress too much about, finding all these flowery words and writing all these big, huge descriptions. Because at the end of the day, they're going to have a ton of fun and they're going to be imagining this stuff themselves no matter what.
It's true.
So don't stress the details.
It's true. That speaks right to the Chris Perkins approach, right? Like, I've listened to whole campaigns where he just very briefly describes stuff, and I still see a crystal clear image in my mind of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But all right, we're gonna move on to our bit of the episode. Are you ready, Eric?
Ready for Jay's revenge? Yes, I am.
No, this isn't like that. So the bit this week, I like to call NPC Name Generator.
Oh no.
So I want to test out Eric's strength as a blossoming dungeon master. Because sometimes in D&D games, the player characters will approach an NPC that you had no intention of flushing out. And you have to come up with a name, a voice, a personality, all kinds of stuff for that NPC on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to put Eric through the ringer and see how well he does. So there are 3 rounds to this game. Round number 1 is just the name. So I'm going to describe a character to you, Eric, and you have to give that character a name. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so the first character is a female Goliath merchant who sells adventuring gear at an extremely marked up price and threatens anyone who tries to haggle. What is this character's name?
A female Goliath. Mm-hmm. My first thought, just thinking my thought process out loud, Goliaths tend to be pretty succinct.
Okay.
They don't really do much flourishing, so something quick, guttural. Hildrick?
Hildrick. I love it. All right. So that's the first one. The second one in round 1 is an 80-year-old retired human knight who is missing his left ear, has a tattoo of a tiger on his right hand, and has recently come into possession of an unreasonable amount of fish, and it's not clear why. I came up with this description. It's so stupid. Human knight who's missing his left ear, has a tattoo of a tiger on his right hand, and has recently come into a possession of an unreasonable amount of fish, and it's not clear why.
So I'm thinking, first of all, they're a sir because they're a knight.
Okay.
Kind of a kooky name, kind of a funny character. Sir Filsworth Biggle.
Oh man, I knew this was gonna be good. Sir Filsworth Biggle. Oh, that's perfect. That was a good one, Eric. All right. So that's round 1. It's just the name. Now we're going to get into a little bit tougher. So round 2, I will provide the name, and I need you to give a brief description and or any personality traits of this character. Very brief. Enough for the characters, the player characters to interact with this character. You know what I'm saying?
All right. Interesting.
All right, so the first one is Mrs. Moira Pockets.
Mrs. Moira Pockets.
Yeah.
I'm going to say she's a halfling madame of a small town. What's the word? Not boudoir. The sex workers.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm familiar. That's good enough.
But she is a firm but fair motherly figure to the girls and boys that work for her.
I fucking love it.
That's beautiful.
Brothel. I wasn't even worried about it. Oh, I love it. Okay, so that's really good, Eric. So the next one for round 2 is Baron von Leichenberger.
Baron von Leichenberger. I'm going to say this is a Furbolg, distinguished gentleman who is more of a folklore than an actual hero. He has played himself up in taverns across the land.
I love that. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Lots of gravitas and bravado.
Oh, yeah. Very played his adventurers up tenfold.
That is amazing. Okay, last round. This is the tough one. So you have to give me the name, the description, and the personality trait, and I'm going to give you a brief sort of overview of who the character is.
So I have to give you the name,
mix round 1 and round 2 together. I'm just going to give you like really baseline stuff.
Okay.
So, a male tiefling shopkeeper.
Male sheepling, tiefling shopkeeper.
Yeah.
I'm going to say he's known as Damascus.
Okay.
He is an apprentice to his father, a much more fiery figure, although he is quite a bit more tempered and even-keeled.
Fucking sick, man. You're pretty good at this. That's like a whole ass character. Okay, the next one. So this one is a non-binary NPC witness to a crime that the PCs have to investigate the crime, right? So she's a witness, or they are a witness.
Ooh, this is a tough one.
Mm-hmm. It's very real too. Like this is something that would happen.
I'm going to say they are. I don't want to just say Bob the Human. They are Meldrin.
Okay.
Can you give me the description again?
It's just a non-binary NPC that witnessed a crime. So you got to come up with the whole shebang.
Yeah. They are Melnin, a drow beggar on the streets.
Oh, good one. That's good. Do they have any tics or personality traits?
They are very shy and skittish, refusing to wear anything but long, very encompassing clothing to hide themselves in.
Very good. Very good, Eric. Oh, that was great. All right. So there's one last one. This is the bonus round. And you got to be quick with it. All right. They are 3 dwarf brothers that are mithril miners.
3 dwarves. Oh,
Yes.
Man, I don't think.
And they're brothers. So they're brothers. So they they came up together and stuff. So it's basically one NPC that is 3.
Right. So 3 identical dwarven brothers. I'm going to say, how are dwarves named? I don't remember. They're going to go by Clang, Bang, and Ding.
That is fucking perfect. Clang, Bang, and Ding.
And they were blacksmiths before their shop closed down, so they all had to work in the same mine together.
Distinguish the 3.
Clang was the primary blacksmith, the most skilled of the 3. Even though they are identical, he has probably the longest beard among them.
Perfect.
Bang was like the head of the actual shop. He was the one who sold the merchandise, balanced books, yeah. And Ding was the assistant, the lovable but kind of clumsy one.
I love it. Way to go, Eric. You are the man. You did great, dude. I love that. Clang, Bang, and Ding are now in my campaign, and they exist somewhere in the world. So good. So does Baron von Leichenberger. He's out there somewhere. But all right, we did it.
Oh,
episode 2 down.
That was a good game. I would
There's
say that was favorite fruit from last time. That was fun though. That was fun.
I'm glad. All right. So are you ready to wrap this bad boy up?
Oh yes.
All right. Well, that was another great episode of the Plane Hoppers Guild, and we're going to end this episode with a excerpt from the Plane Hoppers Guild Handbook. This is the Plane Hoppers Guild Handbook tip number 193. Never make a deal with a devil unless you have a very good, very brave lawyer.
And remember, always get copies of that pact.
All right, see you guys later.
See y'all.
Thank you for joining the Plane Hoppers Guild.